how great would it be if we firmly built our lives upon Him, and not just the figurative idea of this, of how so often in church we're like, yeah, I go to church, I build my life upon Christ, but then I go home and I worry about my checking account, or I go home and I worry about what's going to happen next to this situation or that situation, and I stress and I get involved and I insert myself into situations and the problems that aren't mine to deal with. Just yesterday I got a call on my phone, and I saw the number that came up and I saw it ringing, and I said to myself, there is just drama on the other end of this phone. There is no reason to answer this phone. And I wanted to answer it because there's a part of me that likes drama. I like being involved. I like kind of being in the mix. I like the spotlight. If there's drama, I'd like to be involved in that for just a moment. But I hung it up, or I let it go to voicemail, because just because your phone rings, you don't have to answer it. That's just the truth of life. We carry it around with us all the time. And now I'm not ignoring you personally if you call me, but sometimes, that's just, I feel like I've said that, and now I've really sullied myself as a responsive pastor, but oh well. It's out there now, might as well just go with it. But just because it rings me, I have to ring it. But I thought to myself, there's just drama on this phone, and there was. And it turns out that as the events of the evening played out, the drama call that I got didn't have anything to do with how the rest of the evening went. And everything worked out perfectly fine, and everything was good, and nothing had to be worried about, and no phone conversation had to occur. And it wasn't in that moment where I was like, Lord, I just trust you. But I just decided I wasn't going to be involved in the drama. And so while it wasn't as spiritual a point as I'm trying to make, the example I think is pertinent, because there are so many times where we could just uninsert ourselves from drama. Just pull back for just a moment. Let the crazy happen, and then when all the dust settles, see where God is in the midst of that. Because, and sometimes you're going to find He's not even there. It's just a bunch of crazy happening in a weird spot. And that has nothing to do with my sermon tonight, but I just felt like I was listening to that. I was like, what if we build our lives on Him and His foundation and His truth? And said, you know what, I'm not going to get involved. I'm not going to let the God stone come in and then the Jonathan stone come in over top of that, or in the midst of that, or underneath it. I'm just going to let God's stones continue to pile up in my life. How much different would my life look if I just built my life fully upon Him? And I say that because I'm not always the best example of that, but I do try hard. The longer that I live, the more that I try. And maybe this is just for me tonight, but somebody perhaps needs to hear the opportunity. Sometimes you just got to unplug from the drama and just build your life upon the stones of God and what He's doing in your life. Because He's got some really amazing structures He wants to put up. And if you keep getting in the way, you're going to keep knocking it down. So just let Him build for a minute. Let Him keep going. So with that said, there's no easy transition out of that. We're going to jump into our message for this evening. And last week I had no intention of making this a series. I had no intention of letting it be this thing that went on going, but after we left the stage last night and last week, and we went home, I kind of thought to myself, you know what? I think I got another Pixar movie in me. So I woke up Sunday morning and I came in the church, and before the first service, I started praying. I was like, God, which is my typical Sunday morning. I come in before I'm going to be like 7:30, 8 o'clock. I'm like, Lord, what do you have in store for next Saturday? I know last Saturday was great, but Lord, what do you got next? And he dropped this incredible idea in my heart. And so I thought, you know what, that's a good idea, God, I'm going to go with that. And so I found some ideas out of this particular movie that I just want to share with you this evening. So the title of the message is Our Incredible Identity, because God has created you to be somebody that is just incredible and amazing. I tell our students all the time over in the City on a Hill space that God created you for this season and for this moment and for this purpose and for this time. That it's not by accident, it's not a mistake. And just because you're a certain height or a certain weight or a certain skin color or you have a certain family situation, it's not an accident. God has that working together, and He's working all things together for the good of those that love Him. And so as we continue to press into God, we continue to find that our circumstances aren't defining us, but they are helping us discover who God has created us to be. And so I don't give it to them that heavy, but that's essentially what we try to talk about when we're with Him, and that's the truth of our lives. And so this evening, I just want to take a little bit of time and talk about our incredible identities. If you're familiar with the movie, if you know a little bit about the movie, then you'll love this. And if you don't know anything about it, I'm going to spoil the whole movie for you, but it's still worth watching, trust me. So I want to begin tonight, though, by reading a verse that has really inspired this message and is really kind of the focus of ministry. When Stacey and I sit down and we say, what do we want to do with a ministry? Certainly there are specific terms that deal with children's ministry or marriage ministry or even what we do here on Saturday nights. But there's a kind of an overriding verse, if you will, that I really have sort of adopted as my ministry goal or perspective. It's found in 1 Corinthians chapter 12. This is Paul. He's writing the letter to the church in Corinth, trying to teach them how to be a good church. You see, he's established them, and they're starting to grow, and things are starting to go well, but there are some issues, there are some circumstances that they need to correct and they need to change. And so he writes a first letter to them, hey, you want to tighten this up a little bit, and then they kind of reject it. He writes a little angry letter, and then they throw that away, and then he writes 2 Corinthians and really kind of hits them between the eyes, and they straighten up, and everything's good, and God's glorified. But in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, I want to read this particular passage here, chapter 12, verses 4 through 12, and it says this. It says, now there are varieties of gifts, but the same Spirit. There are a variety of ministries, but the same Lord. There are varieties of effects, but the same God who works all things in all persons. I could probably stop right there and that would preach all by itself, because you turn on CNN or Fox News or any other news affiliate and you talk about division and you talk about all these other people, and you go down the street and you see the United Methodists, the Presbyterians, the non-denominational churches, the whoever else, you line them up. And we have lived the lives of human beings as trying to be division, but God says there are different varieties of ministries, but the same Lord. There are varieties of effects, but the same God who works in all persons. Verse 7, but to each one is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. For to one is given the word of wisdom through the Spirit, to another the word of knowledge according to the same Spirit, to another faith by the same Spirit, to another gifts of healing by one Spirit, and to another the effecting of miracles, and to another prophecy, to another distinguishing spirits, and to another various kinds of tongues, and to another interpretation of tongues. But one in the same Spirit works all these things, distributing to each one individually, just as He wills. Not as I will, not as somebody else might will, but as God wills Himself. Verse 12, for even as the body is one, yet it has many members. And all the members of the body, though they are many, are one body. So also is Christ. I mentioned last week how I had this amazing, really cool opportunity. In fact, I just got a text from one of the guys yesterday. Just a really great 48 hours, a better part of 48 hours, maybe it was just a little bit more than 48 hours, to spend some time with my college roommate and several of my friends from college, and kind of a days gone by, if you will, kind of got together. We got to spend some time together. Some of you probably saw some of our photos on Facebook. We recreated a photo from like 20 years ago. And I got to admit, I look pretty much the same except for some of the gruff around my face. Some of those other guys, man, did they age? I stopped aging at 19. But that wasn't funny. During one of these instances that we got a chance to get together, one of my friends who was in the photo, his wife, who did not attend college with us, she wasn't as part of this group of friends that were together when we were at Toccoa. She met us, some of us, for the very first time, and really for the first time saw us all together in this type of environment. And she said, and I quote, she had never met or known of a group of men who could go so deep emotionally or theologically, and then the very next moment make a joke that only a middle schooler would find hilarious. And that is absolutely probably one of the best compliments that I think I was paid that entire week. Because, man, we would go deep. We would be discussing the differences of theology and why does God allow pain in this world, and all of these just crazy ideas. And then somebody would make like a fart joke and everybody would bust out laughing, and then we'd go right back into the deep theology of God's pain and how this all kind of works in our lives, and what original sin really meant, and all of it. It was a great kind of mind-shifting weekend, and we just really found it hilarious. But I took it as a compliment, because really I find like that's my superpower. And so it was really nice to be acknowledged amongst this group of really talented men who also have this ability to go super deep and then come super middle school right in the blink of an eye. But in the aftermath of our gathering and getting together, there had been this group of texts and social media commenting on photos and inside jokes and follow-ups and of those conversations that we had together. And it really kind of made me kind of remember and think about, and this is what kind of hit me on Sunday morning, it made me think about the movie The Incredibles. So stick with me for a second here, and I'll explain to you why. Because I believe that this idea of superheroes in real life isn't just something that our elementary students who head over and sit on a hill, they can embrace and they can identify with, because it's something that really permeates our culture, and it's something that as adults that we enjoy. If you go to the movies and watch the latest Marvel movie that came out, I mean, that thing is going to gross like $300 billion. I'm exaggerating, but a great amount of dollars are going to be grossed in that particular movie, and it's not just because 12-year-olds really enjoy it. It's because 40-year-olds and 50-year-olds and 30-year-olds and the whole gamut of people really enjoy these kind of movies. So this idea of superheroes, they really embrace kind of our culture and our society, and they really embrace parts of our lifestyle without really even realizing it. Because I truly believe that we often create this alter ego in our everyday lives. You have your work persona, your parent persona, your extended family persona, and on and on and on. And there's a certain way that I act around my in-laws, and there's a certain way that I act around, members of my family. There's a certain way that I'll even act when I meet somebody for the first time, right? Because Pastor Jonathan, for somebody for the first time, does not get all the crazy fart jokes, right? That doesn't come out. That's not who I am when I first meet you or our first discussion with you. Danielle and I were just having a conversation the other day about Dave Decker, just today, about when Dave Decker came in a couple of weeks ago, and he said, boy, Jonathan was really mean to you in that video. And what Danielle and I understand is that's my love language sometimes. The cooler or sillier that I am towards you, that's often my expression of how much I care about you and how much I really respect you. So if I'm mean to you, it's a positive thing. Right, Danielle?
Right.
Right, absolutely, right? It can be a thing. Sometimes it's just the way that it works. So we have these different personas, these different kind of alter egos that we have. And they really play a role in our lives, and they play a role in the movie that we're going to talk about today. Because as I mentioned, the movie that we're talking about today is The Incredibles. It came out in 2004. And there was a sequel that was just released last summer, and both were really just great movies, really well written, well animated, well put together. I appreciated it. I may have cried in both of them at some point, even when I rewatched them, but that's not part of this sermon. But in the original movies, The Incredibles tells the story of Mr. Incredible. He's this super strong hero. He fights crime, and his wife, eventual wife, is Elastigirl. She can bend and twist and stretch her body because it's like completely made of like some sort of rubbery plastic material. So in the movie, early on in the first movie, Mr. Incredible, he gets sued by somebody that he saved, and it leads to this idea of this real huge public outcry, and all the superheroes kind of are made to be villains, if you will, because they're creating all this damage, and people are getting hurt from the rescues and all these other things, and so it forces the government, and the storyline's made up, and it's so true. So it forces the government to give up their crime-fighting ways. Like, you're laughing, but it's true. Like, if you think about it, like, as soon as somebody gets hurt, there's like 15 different rules. And you ever go to a water park, like, why do they have that rule? Somebody got hurt, and there was a lawsuit, and now you can't, dangle your child over the railing. Like, that's the rule. Why would you think you'd have to make that a rule? Like, you would think common sense. Well, it's not that common. But anyway, back to what we're talking about here. In the movie, the citizens, they had this cry, this outrage, and so they forced the government to give up, the superheroes to give up their crime-fighting ways, and they kind of go to this superhero relocation program, and they have to promise to never, ever use their superpowers again. So Mr. Incredible becomes Bob Parr. He becomes an insurance adjuster, and his wife Elastigirl is now Helen. She's a stay-at-home mom, and they have 3 kids. Violet, who is a moody teenager. She can turn invisible. She can create these force fields. Dash, she's this rambunctious 10-year-old boy who has this really super speed. He's super quick. Can even run across water and anything that you want. And then they have a little baby, Jack Jack. His superpowers aren't fully developed yet. They start to kind of poke up in certain situations, but the family is doing their best to kind of live this normal life. It's not to appear different in any way. And so their kids they're ordered by their mom not to use their superpowers. It becomes a regular argument, a regular discussion for them not to use their superpowers. And so she tells them the world just wants us to fit in. And to fit in, we have to be like everybody else. And I really think that this movie, it really does a great job of blending the idea of real life problems that a typical family is going to go through with this Incredibles, the Incredibles, their super abilities and super powers that they have. We see a scene where they bicker at the dinner table, and Dash annoys his older sister, and Mr. Incredible is slogging his way through his workday, and deep down, none of them are happy. None of them are happy in this movie because they're struggling to identify with who they really are. They're struggling to allow their true identities, maybe is a better way to say it, out into the public. They're cramping it down, they're holding it back, they're pushing it in. And on one end, you have Dash, who wants to use the superpower to try out for the track team, but his mom's not going to allow it. Then on the other end, you have Violet, right, the moody teenager, and she just hates that she even had superpowers. She says, we act normal, I just want to be normal, I just want to be fitting in. And I think that's true of us sometimes as Christians. We just want to fit in. We just want to be like everybody else. And we try all the time, through all kinds of different mediums and modes, and I can make a whole big thing about we have Christian this and Christian that, an answer to the world's problems, because we just want to fit in. We just want to be like everybody else. We don't mind that we know the gospel truth. We don't mind that we have an understanding of knowledge of Jesus and salvation. But if our neighbors just think that we're like everybody else and we don't have to talk about that Jesus thing all the time, it'd be comforting sometimes. You don't have to amen that, but I understand that. I've been in that situation. Maybe just me. Maybe this message is just for me tonight. But I understand that idea. There's this understanding that I should want to live a life for Christ that is so rambunctiously loud that everybody needs to hear the message, and they do. But then there's a part of me also that goes, maybe I could just be a family for today. So the question that I want to ask you this evening is, are you normal? And I tell you to just turn to your neighbor and ask the question, but I don't want to make sure that I don't want to cause any kind of strife or problems in this situation, because at the end of the day, I don't think any of us are normal. You guys are in church on a Saturday night. You sang your song. You sang songs loudly. You clapped. You're not normal, and that's okay. Because normal is conforming to a standard, a usual, a typical, or an expected kind of way or mean or understanding of things. What you're doing isn't normal, and that's okay. I always like to ask the question when I'm faced with this type of definition, what is the standard? Really, this definition here is conforming to a standard or a usual or typical. What is the standard here? If my standard is normal for me, then that means that everybody else is abnormal. If my standard is normal for someone else, then maybe it's in some unreachable or ideal state of understanding, then I'll never be normal. I'll never be able to reach that. And I'll never be quite capable of achieving that level of normal. And I know a lot of my family members would agree that I am not normal. But it's like asking a fish to climb a tree. Like, that's not a normal thing for a fish to do, but that doesn't mean the fish is abnormal. He's a great swimmer. He's good at being a fish. He's not a monkey that's climbing a tree. And so we're given the same, we have different things that go on. And so what is the standard? What is the standard that we want to kind of go with? But as Christians, we're not called to be normal. You're not called to fit in. You're not called to blend into the background. You're called to be holy. You're called to be set apart. In our world today that is dominated by greed, it's dominated by prejudice, by individualism, holiness is a rare superpower. To be holy means to be Christ-like, to be focused on serving others, to put our faith first in everything that we say and in everything that we do. And that is not normal behavior today. That's not how the world around us acts. But we have these superpowers. We have this ability to act this way. And that's what we really should be calling spiritual gifts. And that's what the Bible calls us to live like. He calls us to live and use our spiritual gifts in everyday circumstances and situations. So the question now is, why don't we? Why do we hide our superpowers instead of exercising them to make a difference in this world? And I think I alluded to it a little bit earlier. I think for me, sometimes I'm afraid of being different. I'm afraid of being not normal. And I can remember all the way back to middle school, right? And all of a sudden your ways start changing in weird ways, and you start growing, and your face breaks out these really crazy little bumps, and you got braces on your teeth, and I had really big, thick, crazy glasses, and man, I just wanted to be normal. I just wanted to not have to wear these big glasses. I just wanted to not have to have these braces on my teeth. I wanted to not have all these bumps on my face. I wanted to be normal. I looked at all the other kids in the class, and they could do this, and I wasn't capable of doing that or acting that way, I just wanted to be normal. I wanted to be kind of there. And I think somewhere along that line, for all of us in middle school or high school, whenever we experience that feeling for the first time, we kind of have continuously wanted to get back to this idea of wanting to fit in, wanting to be like everyone else, wanting to be kind of a part of this crowd, because there's safety in our feeling of numbers. That if I can find somebody that's just like me, and my friends from college, like, we kind of all found each other at college, and we're all very similarly able to be ridiculously deep theologically, and then also middle school humor happening all the time. Like, that's kind of who we are. And so we gravitated to one another, and there's a feeling of safety in that. But that group is not normal. It's not a normal group by any stretch of the imaginations. None of us are normal in that thing, but there's something about that. We want to draw, we want to fit in, we want to kind of blend into this idea, this background, and kind of have it here in our lives. And so that's what the Incredibles are struggling with. That's what they're wanting to find, this kind of idea of wanting to fit in. But the person in the movie that struggles the most with this idea of hiding his identity is Mr. Incredible. because saving people is in his DNA. So at night he will sneak out and he'll listen to police scanners and secretly rescue people from danger. What a ridiculous reason to sneak out at night. But he sneaks out to rescue people from danger. And at one point it gets noticed by the eventual villain in the movie, but that's a whole weird subplot that we don't have to get into. But he gets offered this special mission to go to this top secret island, and so he jumps in right away. He ends up lying to his wife in order to become Mr. Incredible again. And so after completing this mission, after doing the task that he was sent to do on the secret island, he returns home and he's rejuvenated. He's excited, and he's finally getting to use his gifts to be the person that he was created to be. But as all of you know, you can only live a double life for so long. And so Mr. Incredible, he ends up going back on another mission. He gets captured by this evil villain syndrome. And his wife, Elastigirl, finds out. And so she begins a journey, and she travels to the secret island to rescue him. And Dash and Violet, their two children, they sneak their way onto the plane to go with Mom to find Dad and to kind of help rescue and be a part of this mission. And so at various points, as you watch the movie through this rescue attempt, each person has the opportunity and needs to use their superpowers in order to save the family. Each person has to be themselves, the ones that they were created to be, and use the gift that they were given. And by doing so, they save each other, and they save their city, and then it ends up being, because their cities end up being attacked by Syndrome's evil robot. And so all of these amazing things happen because they use their gifts and their talents. And it's just like the passage that I read to start the sermon from 1 Corinthians. Paul often talks about the superpowers that were given by the Holy Spirit, the power to heal, the power to preach, the power to discern, the power to encourage, the power to be generous. There are many different powers. There are many different things that we can do, but they all come from the same Spirit, and each and every one of us has a superpower. You're all superheroes. I tell it to our students all the time. Everybody goes, oh, that's cute because they can, capes and superheroes. But listen, I'll let you in on something. You're a superhero too. You have a superpower. You have an ability to do something amazing that God has given to you. He has blessed you with a superhero thing. Now, you may not be able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. You may not be able to run as fast as Dash or the Flash, or you may not be able to crush buildings like the Incredible Hulk. You may not be able to shoot web out of your wrist like Spider-Man. But you've been called to be generous, to be compassionate, to preach, to teach, to do all the things that we read about earlier. And as I think about this, and as I look at the world around us, as I think about the church, and I think about the superheroes that live inside of its walls, I wonder what causes God greater disappointment. Is it the things that we do wrong? Or is it the gifts that He has given us that we keep wrapped up? Is it the things that we refuse to do because we just want to be normal? We just want to be accepted. We don't want to be thought about one of those church-going, pew-jumping, fire-breathing, devil-stomping Christians that God created us to be. I don't want to use my superpower of prophecy or of generosity. I don't want to be thought of as different. I just want to be in the background here. I just want to kind of do my thing and just be. I wonder what grieves God more. And so every character in this particular movie, they're trying to discover how to use their gifts. They're seeking the answer to the question, who am I? Even the villain Syndrome, who was as a kid dismissed by Mr. Incredible. He's seeking this validation, this wanting to understand why he can't be super like his hero. What is his gift? What is his ability? What is the thing that he can do so he can be super, just like Mr. Incredible? But there's a further point that the movie makes about these gifts. You see, Mr. Incredible gets himself into trouble when he tries to use his gifts all by himself. At one point, Elastigirl confronts him about trying to do everything himself, and he confesses, I can't lose you. I'm not strong enough. But what he finds out is that he's so much stronger when he shares the burden of saving the world with his family. When he takes and as a part of the family, the group of Incredibles that are together, the Incredible family, when they all start to work together, there's almost nothing that they can't accomplish. They begin to do all kinds of amazing things together. He learns that what makes him incredible isn't his powers or his suit or his fearless courage. It's his family. It's being surrounded by those he loves that truly gives him value. So when he tries to defeat Syndrome by himself, he finds himself to be weak and not quite sufficient, capable of doing the task that was set before him. But when his family joins him and they combine their powers, they're made stronger. It reminds me of one of my favorite verses from the book of Ecclesiastes. It says this. In Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verses 9 through 12, it says, 2 are better than 1 because they have a good return for their labor. For if either of them falls, The one will lift up his companion. But woe to the one who falls when there is not another to lift him up. Furthermore, if two lie down together, they become warm. How can one become warm alone? And if one can overpower him who is alone, two can resist him. A cord of three strands is not quickly torn apart. We are the most powerful when we are working together, sharing the superpowers that we have of love and of service for everyone's sake that we have in this world. You don't have to be Mr. Incredible or Elastigirl to share these superpowers. You don't have to be Superman or Batman. You don't have to do all these things. You just have to be. You don't have to be a movie star. You don't have to be an athlete or a business mogul. Some people think that generosity is because you have great amounts of money in your checking account. That's not what generosity is. You don't have to have all of these amazing things already taken care of before you can use your superpowers. We have to just be ourselves. We have to discover our ultimate identity. Doesn't have to do with our abilities or our disabilities. There's no need to try to be someone. You don't have to try to become somebody. You already are. God said, let there be light, and there was light. God said, let there be you. And there you were. He created you. He knit you. He formed you together in your mother's womb and had you born at this time for this reason and for this purpose. You don't have to become something. You already are that thing. You already are who God has created you to be. Stop trying to be who you think God has called you to be, and just be who you are. And if that's deep theological thoughts with middle school humor, then have a lot of deep theological thoughts and sprinkle in a little middle school humor every once in a while. Be who you are. That's who God created and made you to be. And He doesn't make junk. You're not here by accident. He didn't go, whoa, oh, God. Oh. That's not how you were born. You were born, He was like, there's my girl. There's my boy. That's how you were brought into this world. God did it on purpose and for a reason. You're called to be someone right where you are. Mr. Incredible goes tracing off into this secret island, hoping to find this real version of him that has been buried in this boring, normal life. And yet, it's the most important part of his boring, normal life. His family, that saves him. Life isn't always going to be an adventure, but that doesn't mean that God isn't always there. It's not always doing the steel phantom drop from, that's not always life. And some of you are like, oh, thank you, Lord, that it's not always a steel phantom drop in our lives. But God is always there. He's always with you. He's always got something going on. There's a reason for your season. There is a reason for what you're going through. There is a reason for the time that you have spent in the places that you have spent. So what feels boring to you right now? Maybe it's your job. Maybe it's your home life. Maybe it's this sermon. And I get that. I get that sometimes those things can be boring. I have felt it. But rather than longing for this idea of greener grass and this secret mission to kind of make things interesting and more exciting, perhaps we need to look a little bit harder to what's right there in front of you right now, including your church family, the people that are here, the people that are around you. We may not be normal, but we love you. And we want you to be who God has created you to be. The world needs our superpowers to be able to heal, to love, to include, and to transform. Because there's these villains in the world that are running all over the place. These villains of racism, of injustice, of greed, and of violence. They're taking over. They're winning the battles in so many places. But I wonder what would happen if each of us used the gift that we have to make a difference. What if each of us made a contribution, no matter how small, to help the world become just a little bit of a better place? What if we became who we were created to be? What if we allowed, let me just phrase that verbiage differently. What if we allowed who we were created to be put into the spotlight a little bit more frequently, at the risk of being embarrassed, at the risk of being cast aside by people who don't really matter? What if you're the Jesus those people are going to see? What if you were put around these people who may reject you because nobody else is going to tell them about the gospel? Nobody else is going to show them the love of Christ in their situations in their lives. I wondered what would happen if each of us decided not to be normal. What if we decided to be faithful, to change someone's life for the better, to let them know that they are of value of God? I wonder what would happen if we all acted like we had these amazing spiritual superpowers. I think that if we all acted like that, that would truly be something very incredible. Let's close in a quick word of prayer. Heavenly Father, Lord, in Jesus' name, thanks for your love and grace. Lord, thanks for the incredible people you have created us to be. Lord, thanks for not making us normal and making us holy, righteous, and set apart for you. Lord, we are excited to be your children. So, Lord, help us to embrace that each and every day that we wake up.